Greetings, everybody. So here's a problem that was sent to me, and I think it's a good one to solve. Uh, I don't know if I'll solve it exactly according to the instructions, but I'll show you the big picture for how to solve it and explain a little bit about how we write the answer. So here goes. It says use a sign chart to solve the inequality. An inequality being that it says greater than 0. It doesn't say equals to 0. It says greater than 0. We could also solve it if it said less than 0. Okay. So before I talk about what a sign chart is and how we can use something like that to solve it, let's not even think about it. I don't even want to think about this problem and how to solve it. I want to talk about something that's just a part of it. Okay. So let's start with this. Suppose I have just x plus 8. And I'm curious about that and that alone. Where is it 0? Where is it positive? And where is it negative? Okay? So we're not even going to think about the problem over here at the moment. Just about this one simple thing. So maybe you could even tell just looking at that x plus 8 would be 0, if that's what you want to know, if the x was negative 8. And that's true. If you're not sure how to determine that just by looking at it, if it doesn't occur to you that way, then we can take x plus 8 and set it equal to 0, subtract 8 from both sides, and say x is negative 8. That means that x plus 8, that entire quantity, will be 0 if the x is negative 8. Okay, now that's part of what I'm asking. I said if you have x plus 8, where or how is it going to be 0? And that's an answer to one of those questions. It's going to be 0 if x is negative 8. Now, what about the rest of it? Where is this going to be positive versus negative? Now, the good thing about this is those values are predictable. They're not random and they're not unexpected. Here's what we can do. If I know that x plus 8 is 0 if the x is negative 8, then I know that it's positive and negative everywhere else, okay? Because there's only 3 choices. It's any number in the world is going to be negative, positive, or 0. Those are your options. So I know it's 0 at negative 8. So all I have to do is test other values to see if it's positive or negative elsewhere. So I could do this. I could say, well, what about left of negative 8 if I have a number line? Say what's left of negative 8? Negative 9, negative 10, negative 11, things like that. And I notice if you take those numbers like that, and put them into x plus 8, that you'll get answers like negative 1, negative 2, and so on, but they're negative, okay? And I'm going to say that means that for every choice of x less than negative 8, x plus 8 will be negative. Now you might think, well, how could I make that conclusion? Because what about negative 11? I didn't try negative 11. What about negative 12? I didn't try negative 12. Well, the truth is, it will, if you test just one number in each region, it will tell you what's going to happen to every number. So if I take one number left of negative 8, such as negative 9, and I get a negative number out of this as a result, it means everything over here is going to have the same effect. Okay. So, okay, what about on the other side of negative 8? So I could try negative 7 or negative 6, and if I put those into x plus 8, I'll get 1 and 2, but 1 and 2 is besides the point. I get positive numbers. Okay. So there. Now I didn't have to try negative 7 and negative 6. I could try, like I said, I could try one number over here to the right of negative 8. And whatever kind of number I get as a result out of x plus 8, whether it be positive or negative, is what happens everywhere. So this is a sign chart, okay? Right here. So this is my, I guess a sign chart could look a little bit different than I have it in my picture, but a sign chart is going to look something like what I've just showed you. This right here. Maybe it doesn't have the words negative and positive spelled out, but it'll look something like that. Just summarizes the information that for x plus 8 or whatever you're dealing with, if x is less than 8, you're going to get a negative result. If it's right, you'll get a positive. If x is negative 8, it'll be 0. And that answers this question that I posed at the beginning as far as x plus 8. Where is it 0? Where is it positive and negative? It's all summarized on the sign chart. Okay, now that has an awful lot to do with how we solve this one. But I want to give you an analogy to how I'm going to end up solving it first. Okay, so the analogy is just meant to be something simpler that's going to work the same way as what I'm about to do. Okay, but it might be nice to know in simpler terms what to expect to happen. So if I was going to solve this, it's kind of like this thing over here. Notice that my problem says x times x plus 8, then divide by x minus 3, greater than 0. What's it going to take for this to be greater than 0? Well, here's one way that could happen. If you take like two numbers that are multiplied and divide by another one and have it be positive, it could happen if it was like this. What if you had a negative times a positive, then divide by a negative? That, what that number is besides the point. Wouldn't it have to be positive? Wouldn't it have to be greater than 0? That's the way it works when you multiply and divide sign numbers. Negative 2 times 5, that's negative 10. And negative 10 times negative 3, a negative divided by a negative is positive. So we'll be reducing this problem to something a lot like that. Okay? Whether this fraction is greater than 0 will depend on whether you have like a negative divide by a negative times a negative. Like if it works out with the signs of these three things that are here so that I'm getting a positive number, then it will be solved. Okay? All right, so here's how we do it. So I make a sign chart for each thing in this. X plus 8, and x minus 3. Okay? All right, so this top one is supposed to be x plus 8, but I forgot to, or just x. So I forgot to write it down, so I'm going to say x, even though that looks really messy. So that top one is x, this middle one is x plus 8, and this bottom one is x minus 3. Those are all three components of this problem. Now, notice that I did take what I have here and I factored it because I know that I need to reduce this kind of problem to multiplication and division and then check the signs to see if I get something positive or greater than 0. So all I did at this step was I made a sign chart with all three things that were given to me. Okay? Sign charts like this. It tells me for x plus 8, for example, where it's 0, where it's negative and positive. Now just imagine I did that for x plus 8, x minus 3. Okay? So here's my sign chart. Now, let's look at this one piece at a time. If the x is bigger than 3, meaning over here, here's the way the arithmetic is going to work out in that. You're going to be multiplying a positive times a positive times a positive. And that would be overall greater than 0. Now that's like in this region right here. So just imagine for a second that I'm just looking at a little piece of this sign chart to figure out how it's going to do what I need it to do. So like right here, I'm looking at just x more than 3. Positive times positive times positive. That's greater than 0. You multiply 3 positive numbers, or you multiply 2 positive numbers and divide by a positive, you'll get a positive answer. Okay? So I know part of my answer is going to be this part of the number line, x bigger than 3, because every piece of this works out to be positive. Okay? So that is one part of my answer. There might be another part, but at least I know this part. So I'll say my first part, x greater than 3 is a solution. It's going to work because that expression that I'm given to start with, this right here, will turn out to be a positive number times another positive number, divide by a positive number, and that's greater than 0, and that's what is a solution to this. Okay? Now what we'll have to do is we'll have to look at every piece of this and see if that same thing happens. We'll have to look at 0 to 3. And negative 8 to 0, and negative infinity to negative 8. Now, I don't think 0 to 3 will work because what are you going to do then? A negative times a positive times a positive. If you multiply a negative times a positive and a positive, that's not going to be greater than 0. That's not how it works with sign numbers. So, okay, that middle region from 0 to 3, that doesn't work. Okay, this last region here from -8 to 0 is going to work. So look at this, -8 to 0. What do you, for numbers in there, how's it going to work? You got a negative, a positive, and a negative. So, okay, yeah, so if I take a negative times a positive times a negative, or a negative times a positive divided by whatever the case is, you'll get a positive number as an answer. So I'm going to include that as part of my solution too. So anything between -8 and 0 is also part of our answer, because that expression we're given in the beginning turns out to be a negative times a positive divided by a negative, which is greater than 0, and which would work according to what we're trying to solve. Okay, now from 0 to 3 doesn't work. From -infinity to -8, I would have to check out here also. That doesn't work either, because that's a negative times a negative times a negative. Okay, so yeah, that wouldn't give you a positive number as a result. So just the parts of the number line that I've boxed here in red are the ones that are going to work for what we're trying to do there. Okay, so I could say just informally my answer is any number that's either more than 3, that's this area here, or between -8 and 0, and that's this one. Those are where your answers are going to be. You pick any number at random in those spots, you can plug it into this, and you'll see that it works out the way that I described here. Okay, now that is me writing the solution with inequalities, right? That part. Interval notation would be like this: -8 to 0. Okay, that's going to be all the numbers between -8 and 0, and then 3 to infinity. That's going to be everything more than 3. And that symbol right there is the union symbol in interval notation, and it functions like the word or, because we were going to say anything more than 3 or between -8 and 0 is going to work. Okay, so that's how it works, and that's the various ways we can write our answer. You could solve anything like this the same way. All you have to do is make the sign chart and then think about, how am I going to multiply and divide in sequence according to what I have to get, if it says positive, greater than 0, or if it was less than 0, that'd be negative. You just have to know the rules for multiplying and dividing sign numbers.